Ia mo peo na awilipiʻiga i le tatou tamā nei foʻi tulama nei aso le tatou feisiloaʻi foʻi luga o le ea ae mo peo na awilipiʻiga i le tua ia e maise foʻi faatulou atu i aufaigaluega paia le tua po o fataulaga e fia o le atunuu i lenei foʻi i tulā o le tatou pokalame tusaʻo atu lenei mai nei foʻi vaega o le kelope i le United States o America. Ia tusaʻo atu o a foʻi lou silafia no le tupu i lenei vaega o le kelope ia e faapena foʻi no loo taʻutaʻua ai o tatou tagata tele a foʻi no loo tupu nei atunuu aua maua se avanoa tāua e mate feiloaʻi ai ma talanoa i luga o tagata faʻilagi ia ma le se tasi foʻi o tamaʻitaʻiloga i faiga o ata tifaga ia o le lona suafa o Kimberlee Bassford mo mai lona PA ma lona faailoga ma le Harvard University faapena foʻi ma le lona master degree mai le University California Berkeley ia ma o ia o le faatonu o le director producer ma le writer ia po o le faatonu o ia foʻi sa tusia le ata o loo tatou faatagi neʻi ai e tusa lea e fuafua i le soifuaga foʻi se tasi o sa moeloga sa foʻi silafia mai le atunuu Sia Figiel ae le io atu ni fesili i le sunga ia Kimberlee Bassford ia o le a malulua foʻi mai o le atunuu no le talanoaga le afea le lagana a faaperetania ae for this morning I want to welcome you Kimberlee Bassford talofa aloha malo malo lelei faafetailewa thank you for coming on and thank you for being with us on Radio Samoa this morning.
Talofa, Ken, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I guess I have to. We start now with the movie. Can you explain a little bit about yourself and how do you got into making a documentary on Sia Figiel's life?
Sure. So I'm a independent documentary filmmaker. I am based in Honolulu, Hawaii, which is where I'm from. I was born and raised here. And in a way, I think this film really started 27 years ago because that's when I was a college student and I chose to study abroad for a semester in Samoa. And I read Sia's books. They were assigned to us. And I just remember sitting in my dorm room at the University of South Pacific in Apia and reading these stories. And they're just books that really stay with you. At the time, I was in my early 20s and I was trying to figure out my place in the world, and here are these stories that Sia wrote about young women, trying to figure out their place in the world as well. And I saw a lot of universals, even though the stories she writes are so specific. There's so much, these girls growing up in Samoa and the village in 1970s. To me, like a lot of the themes are very universal. Yeah, I was just really impressed with her as a writer, and I just remember reading these books and kind of wanting to know who this person who wrote the books were. And then if you fast forward to 2016, Sia was in Honolulu to launch her latest novel, Free Love, and I saw in the newspaper a little blurb about her doing a couple of events, so I decided to go in person, and I was just really mesmerized by her. She's very charismatic. She's larger than life. Of course, she read from Free Love, but she was also there to sort of talk about her own odyssey that she was about to go on because she was about to walk across America to raise awareness of diabetes and obesity. Those are things that she had been struggling with, and she wanted to do this huge walk to sort of raise awareness amongst the Pacific Islander communities in the U.S. about these diseases. So she was talking a lot about that actually, and I thought, wow, look at this writer, this activist. I just thought there might be an interesting story there. So I went up and I introduced myself to her, and I asked her if she'd be interested in having me document her walk, and that's really where the project began. So it's been 9 years in the making, this film, and it's taken several different turns in those 9 years. But that's how that was my connection to Sia, was that I read her books many years ago, and then I was just really curious about her as a writer. And once I met her in person, I thought, she had a story to share.
Before you saw her in person, in real life, and reading her books, what was the common theme to you that came across from her writings?
Yeah. So, I mean, Sia has a very bold voice, I would say, as a writer. You know, if you just read Where We Once Belonged, her very first sentence is one you don't really forget. And so I think that's part of it. You know, there's this, it seems like in her voice and her writing, she's very unafraid. She's unafraid to go to places that maybe other people would shy away from. And, I saw that too when I met her in person, you know, how she was talking at the reading. You know, you go to a reading and you think an author is mainly going to be just reading passages from their book, but instead she was also talking about her personal life and these struggles with these health issues. And so, again, like that bold voice, which is why I thought she'd be a great subject for a film. But yeah, before I even met her, I just thought like based on the things she chose to write about. I mean, I also was just drawn to the fact that she centered her stories on the voices of young girls, young adolescent girls. You know, because my previous films have all been about girls and women, and so I think that's just a subject I'm passionate about. So that sort of drew me to her writing as well. That she really wanted to uh, bring voice to, I guess, these voices that she felt hadn't been expressed enough in the Samoan and Pacific literature.
The film we're talking about, or the documentary, it's called Before the Moon Falls. Is that right?
Yes, Before
Uh,
the Moon Falls.
when and why did you name your film Before the Moon Falls? When was that? Was it before May 2024, or was it after May 2024?
So the title of the film Before the Moon Falls came about after May 2024. It probably came about sometime last fall. We had a different, I mean, over the 9 years, we had many different working titles for the film. But we had a title that we were using for a while, Eye of the Water, which is something that Sia herself had helped us identify as a title for the film. Um, you'll see in the film, there's water is a big motif. We have lots of shots of the ocean, water in different forms, and water features heavily in Sia's work. So that's where we originally were going to have that title. But after May 2024, it didn't really seem to fit the overall story we were telling anymore. And so the idea of the moon was something that I was interested in. It's also a motif in Sia's writing. Like one of her books is called Girl in the Moon Circle. So I liked that it was a lyrical title. Like you don't exactly know what it means when you hear it, but it's hopefully intriguing. And then the moon, of course, features heavily, and that's, you know, connects to Sia's writing. But then to me, the moon has always been associated in like kind of Western symbolism with mental illness to a degree. And then the moon goes through different phases, and you know, so it's like, you know, in a way, kind of bipolar, where sometimes it's very dark and sometimes it's very bright. So it just seemed to work on many levels. Um, and we really liked Before the Moon Falls because, like I said, the film has been a project for 9 years, and most of the story you see in the film is really Sia's story, you know, in the 8 years leading up to what happened last May. So it really is Before the Moon Falls to kind of give the emphasis on her story before the tragedy.
What were you thinking when you heard that Professor Dr. Caroline Senovayana was killed and Sia was the prime suspect? What were you thinking at that time?
Yeah. It was just really sad and shocking. I mean, I didn't know what to think at first, so the news of what happened in Samoa came out over several days. So, you know, at first I just heard that a woman had been arrested in connection with another woman's death. They hadn't released Sia's name, but it sounded a lot like Sia, so it was kind of like just trying to wait and see until we got more details. But once I did hear that it was Dr. Caroline Sina Gabbard, who I've known as Sina, yeah, that was really just shocking because I knew that they were friends, you know, I knew that they were close. And just also sad for Sina and her family. Just sad for everybody, you know. We had filmed with Sia just 2 months prior in Samoa, and everything, as far as I could tell, seemed good and seemed well. And so it just was really sad to hear that this had happened.
I have, like most Samoans, I have like 100 questions, but because of the time, I'm just going to do a chop down to about a couple of them. What is the most significant quote from Sia that stood out from your conversations during the 90s?
Oh, well, I mean, Sia is so articulate and so eloquent. I mean, it's hard to just I mean, every time she would talk, I would just sort of be mesmerized. I just love her writing, and she is able to think on her feet and has a lot of she often shares a lot of Samoan proverbs. And she would just like kind of insert them in conversation, and they were always really beautiful. And actually that's another just connection to the film title, and you'll see it in the film, is that there is a, I guess it's called a proverb, when High Chief dies, the moon has fallen, fallen, fallen. So that's another connection to the film title. But there is one of my favorite quotes that Sia says in the film where she's talking about how, she feels like she's been hiding from her sister, her kids in her community, because she doesn't want them to see her broken. But maybe they do need to see her broken. And that's always been like a really favorite quote of mine from her. She said it in an interview. We have it in the film because so much of her journey, for the 8 years prior to the murder was about her struggling with many things and trying to understand herself and trying to come to accept herself, and but a lot of times just hiding all of that, right? Like, she has this public face as a writer, and people see her as this, or they did see her as this warrior, and she was always a bit uncomfortable with that because she knew that she was struggling with a lot, but this idea that you have to hide it, like that she couldn't, or that she want, I mean, she felt that herself, like she didn't want people to see that. So I really like that, because I think what I'd like this film to do is to just open up conversations, and I think conversations around mental health, and around people's struggles, so that I think if we talk about it more, we can help each other and hopefully not have tragedies like this. But yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes of hers, is her
So,
talking about,
uh,
yeah,
I know
feeling
filmmakers
broken.
always, have a theme or perspective. Um, uh, what should we, as an audience, take away from the movie in general, or the film? As you
Yeah.
know, there's a lot of social media judgment against you. That how can this film help put everything in perspective?
Yeah. Well, I think the theme has always been healing. That was what the film was before last May. It was a story, an intimate story of a woman who's an artist who is struggling to heal. And I had hoped it was going to be a story that had a hopeful ending where you would see that she was on her way to healing. And then, of course, in reality, that wasn't really the case, and it's much more complicated. But I guess the idea of healing, it's complicated. It's not like something you do and then it's done. It's ongoing and it takes a lot of work, and there's a lot of back and forth. And I think you'll see that in her journey, those 8 years leading up to the tragedy. And then what I really hope for the film is that it just helps maybe open the door to healing, for people who knew Sia or Sina or both of them. I mean, I know it's been really hard for the entire, Pacifica community, Samoan community, literary community. And there's a lot of hurt and pain. And I just hope the film, for people who choose to see it, I hope people will be open to seeing the story. But that, yeah, it just sort of opens that door to
Mhm.
healing.
Just something on the side, very short. I noticed that you have selected a well-known Samoan composer and musician, Paulina
Yes.
Salima. And what kind of decisions that have you made in terms of because music does enhances, dramatizes, and sometimes affects emotionally the storytelling, and subtleties and nuances of a film. What role does music play in that in your filmmaking, especially this documentary?
Oh, thank you for asking that. Yeah, so Polima Salima is our composer, and it was wonderful working with him. I think overall, I mean, I'd love for him to be able to answer questions about the score, but yeah, we were going for something that was, helped just lend that sense of intimacy to the storytelling, and that was subtle. it's a documentary score, so we didn't really want it to sort of draw attention to itself, but that it just sort of helps kind of guide the viewer in a very subtle way and just kind of supports the emotion that we wanted for the different scenes. Um, so yeah, and so it's a lot of piano, and then it's kind of like mainly piano and strings score, and it's yeah, it's beautiful. I really love it.
Uh, I've interviewed both Professor Sinabayana and Sia many, many times, and there's a lot of cultural, you know, differences in different beliefs. But maybe I should ask you, how do you feel? You know both of them, and I know we've discussed, and I'm not going to ask anything about the case at all, and it shouldn't be in this book. But what do you think the young kids should learn from a lot of this? Because definitely CM did provide something for the youth.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I hope people will still be interested in her writing because I think there's a lot of things that you can take away from it, about the culture, about struggles, about girls' experiences. I hope what happened doesn't invalidate her contribution to Pacific literature and to, just cultural knowledge. Um, but I know it's also complicated, and don't want to yeah, I understand, people have a lot of different feelings about Sia and her writing and just about what happened. But yeah, I think hopefully what I really would love for people just to like open up the conversations about mental health because
Mental health.
I think a lot of people struggle, and a lot of young people, I mean, young and old. It's a very human issue. And I
Mhm.
don't know that any society has really figured it all out. But I think
Yeah.
when it's so taboo and so that people can't even talk about it, then I think that's can be really tough.
You're launching it in New Zealand. Is that next week or this month?
The
And
28th, yes.
28th, and then afterwards it's going to be in the U.S. Later on this year. Is that right?
That's our
Uh,
plan. So right now we're
yeah,
just focused on the New Zealand screenings,
New
but we do
Zealand
hope.
one.
Hmm.
And I know, well, hopefully we'll talk again. But I have one last question: is the film going to have be available with Samoan subtitles in the future?
I would like that. So I'd love to, yeah, have maybe we can talk about that if you have ideas of how we can do that. But yes, we can have that done.
I want to thank you very much, Kimberlee Bassford, the director, producer, and writer for the movie Before the
Before the
Moon
move
Falls.
falls. Yes. Thank you,
Thank you so
Fafe Tai
much.
Tale Lava, for
And
having
let
me.
me give you this couple seconds, moments for you just to say final thoughts and say hello.
Oh,
Go
well,
ahead.
thank you. And I hope that we'd love to have, full houses at our screenings in New Zealand. So our premiere is on June 28th in Auckland at the Capitol Cinema. And then we'll have a encore screening on July 9th in Auckland, and then July 17th in Christchurch, and July 19th in Wellington. Um, and yeah, please come, please spread the word about the film. And after New Zealand, definitely we hope to get it around to other places in the world. So thank you for
Thank you
having
so
me here
much.
today.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mahalo. Lava, Kimberlee Bassford, my director, my producer, my writer, po le fo pusili o le ata o lo tato whataye nei o le Before the Moon Falls. Watu whatai mai le tuma pe ko i se sala a le ona mai o vai pul portal tau tai e fo tai mi sela na tu yama ai mo tai mi nei. I want to thank you, Kimberlee, again. Thank you so much.
Thank
Lava.
you.
Soifua.